So, alongside the flea market changes that we discussed in the previous video, BSG also made it so that upgrading modules in your hideout now need the found and raid status for most barter items. A month and a half later, and we're going to talk about the impact this change had on the game and how people go about interacting with the hideout. Between the hideout and the flea market, I'd say the latter, being locked off for 2 weeks, was more impactful because almost everybody uses the flea market for one reason or another. But the hideout, technically you can play the game and never use it. You don't have to invest any time, money, or items into it. But EFT does heavily incentivize you to do so. There's a lot of good that can come from the hideout, but you need to put in the work to see the fruits of that labor. Either way, a month and a half later, and people are still struggling to get even the basic modules upgraded to progress through the rest of the hideout. I know I was, and honestly still am. It's been quite a challenge that will hopefully be adjusted going forward, or simply reverted for whenever the next wipe will occur. The biggest conundrum with found and raid hideout items is that, in a vacuum, it makes total sense. It's going to slow people down from being able to use whatever items they have laying around in their inventory, while also forcing players to make the tough choice when they do find something they need of either trying to extract as soon as possible or staying in that raid and risking the item becoming useless. The problem with this mindset, however, is that this massive change also came with the flea market being turned off for 2 weeks. Yes, not being able to buy weapons, ammos, and armors is good, but what people are actually using the flea for in the early game is to speedrun their hideout as fast as possible. As soon as you hit level 15, if you have the rubles, you can either liquidate all that money into your hideout and upgrade module after module, or do the opposite and sell all the items you've been collecting to make tons of money, because the found and raid restriction on the flea has been gone for over a wipe now. But when these two massive changes are introduced at the same time, obviously some level of frustrations ensue. That all you found and need for lavatory level 1? Well, you died with it, so now not only is it useless to you, but even if you're going to sell it on the flea, nobody's going to buy it. It becomes a paperweight in your stash, or a little over 20,000 rubles to therapist. Knowing that the items can become useless is the biggest flaw with found and raid anything. I have the item, I got what you asked of me, just let me use it, please. In my mind, there are 2 ways to help resolve some of the frustrations with the found and raid hideout, and it's nothing that would be out of this world or wouldn't really make sense. The first would be that if we are hellbent on having found and raid connected to the hideout modules, then lowering the number of items needed across each and every module would make this process feel so much better. Do we really need 14 found and raid light bulbs for illumination level 2? Funnily enough, light bulbs aren't even that hard to find. It's the other items that can become so problematic. I think the best example of the short-sightedness of BSG when it came to adding found and raid to the hideout was, you know that barter at mechanic for a tool set? You know the one, you have to have a bunch of different tools for it? Well, the hideout needs a lot of tool sets, 11 to be exact. Finding 11 was hard enough, but now make them found in raid and it kind of becomes a nightmare. Well, because we need those items found in raid, that barter at mechanic is now, at least for this wipe, completely useless for upgrading modules, which BSG at least realized and retroactively added a craft for toolsets using the same number of materials. And it only takes 7 minutes, if only all crafts were that quick. It's funny how many layers these problems have once you begin to break them down. The other alternative solution would be to still allow for use of non-found and raid items for upgrading modules. However, if you do end up having all of your items be found and raid for that upgrade, then the build time of that module or upgrade time is drastically reduced. I would say something like 20 to 25%. So if it takes an hour and a half to upgrade, now it'll only take roughly an hour. It doesn't sound like much, but there are so many time gates in the hideout, you'd think you were playing a shitty mobile game, where you get to pay to speed up the process or give you more time to engage with the game before you get paywalled again. And people wonder why Tarkov can be so annoying. It's basically a second job that demands the rest of whatever free time you have. Combine that with some quests also having time gates now, Gunsmith and pretty much every Lightkeeper quest, and it makes you roll your eyes constantly. I'm getting off topic, but these 2 ideas are the only ones I can think of that sound reasonable without taking away from the philosophies of what BSG thinks they want these mechanics to behave like. In the previous video, we talked about the survey results that BSG released on the client and how, while most of the conversation was about the flea market, the second question asked what were some challenges players experienced with having no flea market, and the second highest voted answer was found and raid items needing for the hideout. Almost 21% of players who took part in that survey said that the hideout could use some form of an adjustment, which tells me that while the change is definitely in line with what BSG in the community ultimately wants, a longer early game that feels more rewarding to play, there has to be another way that isn't so toxic and demoralizing when you find the thing you need, die, and can no longer use it. People are okay with change, well, some are. People are okay with having to work a little harder to achieve similar results, but their time cannot feel wasted or stolen from them. It's the ultimate form of disrespect a video game can employ, and can create such a negative feedback loop that ends up having people just walking away. The greatest sin video games make these days, other than trying to milk you for every single dollar attached to your name, is stealing your precious time, and Tarkov for years has not respected the player's time. This is something we'd need to dive into a little bit more in a separate video, but the found and raid hideout is the antithesis of this problem. Overall, people didn't necessarily mind the idea of found and raid hideout changes. It was the reality that items can essentially become useless to them and other players should they die. And nothing hurts more than having an item collect dust in your stash because it serves no purpose other than some rubles. I get it, dying is part of the game. You need to feel the sting of loss and failure every now and again. But the hideout changes, at least to me, left me feeling like my time was being wasted because this one barter item that isn't used anywhere else in the game besides the hideout has no use now. It's like when you die with a flash drive for Skier. There will still be some uses for that flash drive, but now it isn't serving its intended purpose, and I just stare at it in my stash with scathing contempt, hoping I find another one sooner rather than later. If we're going to keep the found and raid hideout, let's make it just a little less toxic, shall we? Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Let me know down in the comment section below your thoughts on the found and raid hideout, how it could be made better, but still existing as a handicap, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about Tarkov mechanics that have more layers than a strawberry shortcake. I hope to see you in future ones.